Good afternoon, it's Gary Sly and the Legacy of Handmade Objects. It's Inauguration Day 2025 and also the day that we celebrate Martin Luther King's birthday. So all sorts of historic events surrounding us today. It's January the 20th, 2025, and I'm here in the shop. I'm always closed on Mondays, but I had some stuff I was working on today, so I decided to come down, and I'm behind the counter, and you can see some of my personal memorabilia behind me there, some paintings, pictures of the kids, things like that. I want to pick up on a couple little scattered topics here at the beginning, and then I want to show you a new piece that I started today and talk a little bit about that. First off, thanks to my friend Denise Best, who's been watching these videos and looked back at episode number 39 where I talked about chicken scratch, and she mentioned that she had done an apron with chicken scratch designs on it, and so she graciously sent me some pictures of those, and you can see those here in the little insert. The first three, the ones with the reddish designs, are ones that Denise worked on, and then she shared a picture of one that she purchased at some kind of a shop or a fair in Indiana. As I mentioned in that episode, in number 39, chicken scratch is a real easy, fun way to kind of pick up on an old piece of heritage and talk a little bit about, I talked a little bit in that episode about how that's pretty easy to do. And you can see that Denise has not only created a beautiful design, but maybe is just a little bit of a collector of chicken scratch. So keep your eyes open when you're out. You may see some fun designs. The other thing I wanted to mention just briefly, because it is Inauguration Day and Martin Luther King's birthday, is an aspect of fiber that we don't often talk about very much, but is very significant in terms of fabric and fiber. Chapter 9 of Claire Hunter's book, Threads of Life. It's entitled Protest, but it's not just about protest. It's largely about the use of flags and banners. And if you think about it, there's quite a rich history of that that goes all the way back, as long as there's been fabric, for that matter. And certainly prior to today, if you had a flag or a banner and it was made before automation occurred, it would have been handmade. And so I wanted to just call attention to that history just a little bit, because it's kind of reflected today as you watch events happening, as you think about all the various historic events that surround this time of the year. Originally, of course, flags were used to carry in battle. They were made large, and they were made with bright colors, and the sewing would have been such that they could have been seen from a long ways away, because you didn't want to be shooting at somebody and find out later that was somebody from your side. So you can understand that flags, in a period of time when you didn't have anything else to enhance your sight at a distance, like binoculars or something like that, would have been immensely important. Flags continue to be important. They are symbols of patriotism. They can be symbols of protest. They can be representations of various ideologies or ideas that people have to share. So flags can be comforting. Flags can be in your face. But watching flags flutter and thinking about the significance of those is a real important use of fabric and fiber in our modern culture. Same thing with banners. I suspect, I haven't really delved into this too much, but I'm going to do a series in a month or so about Christianity and fiber. I suspect the use of banners really gets its start in religious work, maybe not necessarily just Christian banners, but certainly if you're familiar with banners in the Christian church today, you know that they're large, sewn fabric representations of various symbols. If you think about it, in the early church, when there wasn't a lot of literacy and not very many people who attended were able to read, symbols would have been very important to have on banners. So the dove of peace, for instance, or the cross, might have been very important symbols to use in Christian iconography and in the liturgical practices of the early church. So the use of banners in churches is still quite common today. You will see representations of the different seasons of the year. I've been in churches during the Passion Week that had banners or flags that represented the Stations of the Cross. There's a tremendous number of ways that, from a religious perspective, banners have been important. And then also in modern culture, probably reaching back to the Middle Ages during the formation of the different trade guilds, banners would have been used in parades, again, to represent in symbols, not necessarily using words, whatever group or activity you were a part of. If you were a part of a guild that made, cloth, then if you walked in a parade, you would have carried a banner that would have had a symbol that represented that. So handmade objects, hand-sewn objects, hand-cut and designed objects, very, very important in our modern culture in terms of the use of flags and of banners. And I thought that might be something to think about a little bit today as you look at symbols of this country and all the kinds of flags, not just the American flag, but any kind of flags or banners that you might see waving. So those are two little kind of ideas that I wanted to throw out there. I want to walk in the other room, though, and show you this new project that I'm working on. So I'm going to shift the camera around, and I'll join you in the big front room here in just a minute, and we'll talk about my new project. Okay, I'm back. I decided not to turn the lights on in here today because there's enough natural sunshine coming in the front window and it won't create any glare on the work. So my younger brother, my only sibling, is turning 65 this year in September, and his wife and I have been colluding a little bit about what to do for his birthday. And David had a beloved pet named Pepper, his beloved dog, whose picture you see here. Now this is a representation from a cross-stitch pattern, so that's not a real clear picture. But David and Pepper had a very special bond, and the loss of Pepper has been very hard for him. So we decided if we can pull it off, if I can get this done before his birthday in September, I'm going to do a representation of Pepper in cross-stitch. Now I've crowed before about my favorite resource online for doing full coverage pieces, and that's picturecraftwork.com. I love it because it's a way to do these great big complex pieces and really watch the image emerge from a blank piece of fabric. So I've downloaded this picture of Pepper, and as a result, I've gotten a pattern that I've sent off to Office Depot so that they could print it, because I didn't want to worry about whether I could see the pattern clearly. So there's the pattern of the original photograph, and there you see the symbols of the different colors, and they give you a graph to show you how the different pages work. And then what I typically do with a project like this is I lay all the pages out on a table, and I'm an old-fashioned kind of stitcher, so I always start in the middle. So I would figure out how many stitches wide and how many stitches tall the project is, and I would find some place in the middle of the pattern, and I would mark that, and that's where I would start on my fabric. What I've decided for this one is I'm not going to do the whole piece. I'm only going to do Pepper's face. So I'm just going to start working at her nose and just kind of radiate out from there and create a pattern, and probably do some sort of an oval piece of Pepper. So you see I've got my base fabric, and I'm using a 14 count Aida this time, and I thought this blue might be a nice background. And you can see I've just done a few stitches already right in the middle of the pattern to begin work on Pepper's nose. So I hope over the next couple months, as I work on this project, I can show you my progress and you can see how this works. What fascinates me always about full coverage pieces is starting with a big piece of blank canvas like that and watching an image reveal itself. And it's all about pixels. I think we didn't have a word for them for many centuries, but the idea that what we see close up are little individual dots, but when you back off from that, you can see it as a whole picture. And this, the idea of pixels really kind of moves all over the fabric world. If you think about cross stitch, certainly, but also things like weaving, knitting and crocheting. There's just so many ways that pixels, as we know them now, the computer term, manifest themselves in what we do with fiber. A couple of hints to just help you out a little bit if you're thinking about doing a full coverage piece yourself. I've talked about this before, but since I'm using a 14 count, I'm going to use 3 strands of my DMC because I want to make sure the coverage is good and it doesn't look like there's any blank space behind it. When you use a full coverage pattern like this one from Picture Craftwork, you don't have to worry about backstitch. It's the subtle shading of the piece itself that's going to make that work. Choose a needle that's big enough for you to be able to see the eye and get 3 strands through, but don't choose a needle that's so big that it will leave a huge hole in your fabric. So kind of look at that and think a little bit about what you need for that. Use as small a needle as you can, honestly, but make sure you can get the threads through the eye and that you can see it okay when you're threading that eye. The other caution I always give to people who are working on full coverage is be careful with your backs. And I don't say that from a standpoint of saying that the back should look exactly like the front. I think if you're methodical about your stitching, it probably will. But the main thing I find the problem with full coverage pieces is that it gets bumpy because you pass under many times in the same area. I don't know how much you can see of this pattern from here, but you can see there are sections of this pattern where the color changes pretty rapidly, which would mean a lot of tying down and finishing off in the back. And the more of that you have to do, of course, the more bumps and surface or I guess, well, just the more likely it is to get bumpy on the back. So try to spread out your tie downs in the back. Of course, you know, don't make knots in your cross stitch. I probably don't even need to say that, but sometimes we have beginners who are not aware of that. Honestly, this pattern is not as complex as some that I've done. Quite a bit of the same stitch in the same color you can see there. So that's a fun something that I'm going to be working on hopefully over the next 8 months or so. So I'll have a little time at the end to frame it, and I'll share my progress with that on here and possibly on Instagram. I'm not going to put it on Facebook because I don't want to spoil the surprise and I want my brother to see it. Otherwise, I guess probably I'll end for today. I hope that wherever you are, the cold weather's not too awful. It really has been quite cold here in Florida for the last couple of weeks, and up in Ocala where I live, they're saying we might get some freezing rain and perhaps some snow overnight. So that's going to be pretty unusual if that happens here in Florida. So I'll sign off for now. Wishing you the best. This is Gary Sly and the Legacy of Handmade Objects.